Shalom, Israel, grace and blessings from God the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ be unto you all. Praise to the Most High that we made another week to another Sabbath day. And, of course, giving all praises to the Heavenly Father, we do so in the name of His only begotten Son by His Holy Ghost. So with all that being said, let me go ahead and make sure everything's functioning properly here on YouTube first. Let me check this out, see how we're doing. Make sure everything's functioning properly here on YouTube first. It appears we're doing all right. See how we're doing. All praise to the Most High for that. Let me check Facebook, see how we're doing on there. How are we doing on Facebook? Are we live? Make sure everything's functioning properly here on YouTube first. Okay, praise the Most High. Let me go ahead and cut my sound off. And one thing I do want to mention as far as news that I'm not going to touch on, but I did see, and that is, I believe it said, at least one headline that I saw that I didn't really look into, but it did say that, there's multiple sources saying that there's been over 500 earthquakes in around Anchorage, Alaska. Small earthquakes, but there was one big one, one 6.0 magnitude. So, y'all keep the people there in your prayers and pray that they turn to the highest in this time of need. All right. All these are the signs of the times, and it's really only a matter of time. I know people watch this from all over the world, but it's really only a matter of time before earthquakes like that come to your region if they have not already. Because that's where we're at, right? We're in the beginning of sorrows, earthquakes in diverse places as Christ prophesied it would be. All right. Also, I had seen something where there's contaminated pork coming into the country or being stopped from coming into the country, whatever the case may be. So, hey, y'all ain't supposed to be eating that anyway, right? So there is some chastisement going along with that. I did see. That's, I think, just about it. Haven't heard any kind of update on the whole Epstein thing, though it's supposed to be within the next, I think, 2-3 weeks. I think 3 weeks. They were ordered to push something out, so I guess we'll be looking for that. The main thing that I want to talk about tonight is Hanukkah, but there is a story that I want to talk about before we even get to that. And there are different stories that I've seen and stuff. Also, one thing that we're not going to be able to touch on is there was some tankers, I think oil tankers, off the coast of Turkey, blew up, got blown up. As I said, I didn't really look into it, but I seen it. Just thought it was worth mentioning. Maybe it's something that I'll follow up on next week if it's still relevant, if something's still going on as far as that is concerned. Stock and crypto and all that has been plummeting here recently, but that's been over the past few weeks. That's not a recent thing. That's over the past few weeks. They've the wealthier, the BlackRock, the State Street, the Vanguard, they've been dumping off their crypto and various stock as well. So that's something to look out for because they usually can see economic situations coming before they get here. So that's something worth noting, something worth paying attention to, worth looking at. And what else? I've seen something where, and I didn't look into it much. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it will turn into something. But the Congo and Rwanda war may be coming to an end. They may be drawing up some peace deals on that front. They're supposed to be meeting with Trump here in the next few days, as far as I know. Maybe that'll end, but what the scriptures say concerning peace and safety. When they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh. So we'll see how all that turns out. But let me bring this down. First thing I want to talk about, the main thing I want to talk about tonight is Hanukkah. But first, I'll talk about this whole National Guard incident where it says the accused National Guard attacker faces U.S. murder charge. Trump wants to halt third world migration. All right, so Let's see about this migrant who attacked the National Guard soldiers. The Afghan man accused of shooting two National Guard members in Washington, killing one, will face first-degree murder charges for an attack that prompted U.S. President Donald Trump to declare he would stop migrants from third world countries. Right, so he's using this as a situation to stop immigration, at least from third world countries. U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Janine Pirro, said on Fox News on Friday that other charges would be filed against 29-year-old Ramanullah Lockenwall, who she said ambushed the soldiers from the West Virginia National Guard near the White House on Wednesday. Formal charges were not immediately filed against Lockenwall, who had been in the U.S. since 2021 under a program of then President Joe Biden's administration to resettle Afghans who helped the U.S. during the war in their homeland. He was granted asylum under Trump. So you can't say that this is like, oh, this is one of them Biden immigrants. Trump is, or the Trump administration, I should say, is the one who allowed him asylum, right? They could have deported him as soon as they took office, but they did not, because there was a deal made probably during Trump's first term, because that's when the initial withdrawal of Afghanistan happened. But there was a deal made with the Afghani people who helped the U.S. during the U.S.'s wars over there in Afghanistan, that they would be able to come back to the U.S. So Biden brought, when he withdrew out of Afghanistan, he brought Lockenwall here, and Trump granted him asylum. All right, not saying Trump did personally, but his administration. And obviously with Biden, it wouldn't have been him bringing him over here personally. It would have been his administration. All right. In a call on Thursday's Thanksgiving holiday with U.S. military service members, Trump said the shootings were a terrorist attack. Sarah Beckstrom, 20, died of her wounds on Thursday. Her National Guard colleague, 24-year-old Andrew Wolf, was in critical condition, Pirro said on Friday. The two were in Washington as part of Trump's deployment of the military in recent months to help the police fight crime in the city. On Friday morning, following the national holiday, notably fewer National Guard members were seen patrolling the Capitol. So it says, Trump ratchets up rhetoric on immigration. Trump, whose dispatch of troops to Washington faces fierce legal challenges, took to social media late on Thursday to escalate his rhetoric on immigration. Since taking office this year, he has stepped up arrests of immigrants, including some in the U.S. legally, and cracked down on unlawful border crossings while stripping legal status from hundreds of thousands of people, right? So a lot of people saying he's taking this immigration thing too far. Some people, more radical people, saying he's not taking it far enough. I will permanently pause migration from all third world countries to allow the U.S. system to fully recover, terminate all of the millions of Biden illegal admissions, including those signed by Sleepy Joe Biden's auto pen, and remove anyone who is not a net asset to the United States, right? So he's saying all this, yet Trump is the one who granted this Lockenwall guy asylum, right? So he's trying to blame Joe, and yeah, obviously he had a part to play in bringing Lockenwall over here, according to this, but Trump also had a part to play in it as well. He wants to leave that part out. Trump said in his social media post, referring to his predecessor in the White House. Trump did not say which countries he considers third world, nor what he meant by a permanent pause. It echoed the sweeping Muslim ban Trump tried to enact in his first term before it was diluted by successful legal challenges. Right, so it seems like he's trying to do something like that again, except third world seems more sweeping than just Muslim. On Friday, Trump posted again on social media to say he was rescinding any document that Biden signed using an auto pen, a tool that U.S. presidents, including Trump, have used for decades, often to answer mail or sign checks, or sometimes to meet authorization deadlines while traveling outside the Capitol. After taking office in 2021, Biden reversed many of the restrictive immigration policies of Trump's first term, saying they blocked people in need of humanitarian protection and were discriminatory. Asked about Trump's comment on third world countries, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security referred Reuters to 19 countries listed in a June travel ban. Not necessarily going to get into those right now. It's kind of irrelevant, but if it lists them real quick, we can look through the list real quick. But I'm not going to go through trying to dig through this to try to find what countries it is. Not really. So y'all bear with me for a second. If it lists them outright, then Then I'll show them. Okay. Okay, so here it appears to list them. All right, Afghanistan, Burma, Chad, Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Yemen, Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. That appears to be the last one. Okay. So interesting, not from what I could tell, not from any Central American countries or Mexico. Surprisingly enough, even though that tends to be the people that he's sweeping up and shipping out of here. So that's interesting. It's also really interesting to call Iran a third world country. I mean, it's not really. Anyway, all right. Those are the, or at least that's the Department of Homeland Security. That's who they're referencing. That, I mean, Lord only knows if that's what Trump is talking about as well. On Thursday, Homeland Security officials said Trump had ordered a widespread review of asylum cases approved under the Biden administration and permanent residency green cards issued to citizens of the 19 countries, which include Afghanistan. But again, it was Trump who granted this man asylum, right? So is he going to review his own grants for asylum, or is he going to only look at the Biden ones? Jorge Lowery, the managing director of programs and strategy at the American Immigration Council, said the president does not have authority through executive action to make permanent changes to the immigration system, which is codified by Congress. He warned of chaos and disarray in the U.S. immigration system, even if Trump is ultimately blocked by federal courts. Lockenwall entered the U.S. in 2021 through Biden's Operation Allies Welcome. More than 70,000 Afghans have been resettled in the U.S. under the program. For those fearing reprisal by the Taliban forces, who seized control of Afghanistan after the U.S. military withdrawal, officials said Lockenwall was part of a CIA-backed unit in Afghanistan before coming to the U.S. Right, so they say he worked with the CIA, which is weird that they would even say that, because generally speaking, the CIA keeps everything on the hush-hush unless it's declassified, which that's pretty recent to be declassified. He was granted asylum this year under Trump, according to a U.S. government file on him seen by Reuters. Investigators said Lockenwall drove across the country from his home in the state of Washington and shot the two guardsmen with a powerful revolver, a .357 Magnum, before being wounded in an exchange of gunfire with other troops. So, like, that's pretty odd for him to travel all the way across the country to do this, right? Because there are National Guard in every state. I mean, it just is. Now, I'm not saying he should have done it where he was at, but it's just odd that he would go this far to kill one person and injure another, right? If anything, because like obviously the Trump administration is trying to tie this to immigration. So like even if this guy was mad at Trump for cracking down on immigrants, you would think he would go to like a demonstration or like a protest, and when he's seen, National Guard to protest or ICE agents or whatever the case may be, he'd open fire on them, right? Like you would think that's what somebody like this would do. It's just very odd. It's a very odd case. We see more and more of those here recently. Less than 24 hours after the shooting, Trump officials began ordering widespread reviews of immigration policies. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said on Friday he would be proposing regulations to ensure that people he referred to as illegal aliens do not receive certain credits on income tax they had paid. The tax code is set by Congress, which already limits what kind of benefits, if any, non-citizens are eligible to seek. Lockenwall lives in Washington State with his wife and 5 children, according to investigators. Asked whether he was planning to deport the suspect's family, Trump said, "We're looking at the whole situation with family." And if history is any indication, then yeah, Trump's going to deport the mother with the children and everybody else they know. Yeah, I mean, that's what he's been doing. It's just very odd, especially this guy who lives in Washington State and has a family. Usually when you see like shootings and things like that, mass shootings, which this is not a mass shooting, this is I guess, more politically motivated shooting, I guess you'd say. But in any wise, in these cases, usually it's somebody who does not have any family, right? Somebody who does not have anybody close to them, or is a single male, usually a single white male. In this case, obviously Afghani. But even in like terror attacks, usually those are single males that do that. I could be wrong about that. But, and the whole thing is that they're promised 72 virgins, right? So then they do, something to become less lonely, basically, in their minds at least. But in this case, it's just a very odd case. You have a guy who's living all the way across the country with his wife and 5 children, and then he just all of a sudden drives across the country to shoot 2 National Guard people in their hotel or motel. Like, it just very fishy, very fishy. International groups defend asylum seeker rights. The UN agencies urged the U.S. on Friday night to continue allowing asylum seekers across the country, including due process rights, in keeping with international law. We expect all countries, including the U.S., to honor their commitments under the 1953 Refugee Convention, said Farhan Haq, the deputy spokesperson for the UN Secretary General. Jasmine Lillian Diab, director of the Institute for Migration at the Lebanese American University, said freezing Afghan applications or reconsidering thousands of approved asylum claims would disrupt families and local communities. While the recent incident is tragic, using an isolated incident to justify mass restrictions is inconsistent with evidence showing no link between refugee arrivals and increased crime, Diab said in an interview. But it is consistent with how Trump has been concerning immigration. It only takes one event to spark, much upheaval, if you will, and much executive action. So with that, I'll go right to the scriptures on this, and then we'll get into Hanukkah. I only want to touch on like one thing in the scriptures. Just the idea of America and concerning immigration in America. And I don't believe I've hit this scripture, at least here recently, concerning, immigration and things like that. In Daniel 2. So this is Nebuchadnezzar's dream. In Nebuchadnezzar's dream, he saw all the kingdoms of the world. All right, so he saw not every single kingdom, but every major empire. All right. So in his vision, he saw this statue, which started out with a head of gold and a body of I'm trying to what brass it was. Iron? No, the fourth is iron. What's the second one? Silver. Yeah, the body of silver. The belly and thighs of brass, and the legs and feet and toes, of course, of iron and miry clay down at the bottom. All right, so I'll start with verse 40 here with Daniel 2, because it represents the gold at the top is Babylon. I might even have an image here of what it all represents, and this may be accurate, it may not be, but just the image of the statue I want to show you. Where does it say the Daniel 2 statue? Okay, 4 metal statue. Here we go. So, where are we at? Here we go. Let me zoom in a little bit for you. So you see here, we got the head of gold, body of silver, brass or bronze being the belly, and thighs, and then iron and miry clay down at the bottom. That's the statue. All right. So, and said, and the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron. Right. That was the Romans and their empire. For as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. And that's where we're at now. The kingdom is divided. It's divided in its policies. It's divided in the Democrats and Republicans. There's this as Ezra described in 2nd Ezra 11. It was 2 feathers to make up this one kingdom. As Revelation 13 says, it's a lamb that has 2 horns, right? But it spake as a dragon. But there shall be in it the strength of the iron. But the military is very strong, just like the Roman military was very strong, right? For as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. All right, so this is what he's about to explain what he means right here, partly strong, partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. Right, so you got all these different people over here in America, right? It's the great melting pot. But they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay, right? Because you can't mix those two, all right? You can mix what is it, like the different metals, different metal alloys, aluminum and steel, or rather aluminum and iron, I think, together make steel, or there are different metals that can mix, right? Different earth elements that can mix. Iron and clay is not something that can mix, all right? So that's what you see with all the different people that are over here, right? You have, obviously it was founded by Edomites. You had the Israelites that were originally over here, the Northern Kingdom, so-called Indians. You had the so-called black people that were brought over here, Southern Kingdom Israelites. But then you had also these like Asians moving over here. You got Middle Eastern people moving over here. And they're over here, but they're not together, right? You got the Hamites moving over here. And they each still stick to one another, right? But they're all over here, all right? And it was never the purpose for everybody to come over here and just become one. That was never going to happen. That was never the intended purpose of the immigration in America. All right, the intended purpose was for the merchants, of the earth. All right, let me get that. I'll read this again. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. All right, and that's because it was never the purpose. That was never the purpose of America. It may be the lie that they sold people on what America is, but that was never truly the purpose of America, for everybody to come over here and be the same. All right. In Revelation 18, this was the purpose of America. All right. Revelation 18 and verse 1, and after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory, and he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. So understand that about America. It's already destined to fall. It's already destined to fall. All right? For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. All right, so that was the purpose of bringing everybody over here. It wasn't so that everybody could be one. It was so everybody could do business. All right, and America could wax rich off the business of all these different peoples, and everybody coming over here could get rich as well. Right, so that was the purpose of bringing everybody over here. It was never so that everybody could be one. All right, it was so everybody could do business over here. All right. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, that you receive not of her plagues. So that's what we should take out of this. Hey, don't be like America, right? The scripture say, love not the world. All right, the love of money is the root of all evil, right? Don't be like America and pursue after this American dream, right? Don't be like that. All right, come out of her. All right, come out of her sins. All right. So that being said, I talked about coming out of Thanksgiving last week. Right, we talked about that last week. What are we supposed to get into? We're supposed to come into the Feast of Dedication, Hanukkah. All right, so I'll talk some on that. Talk about Hanukkah a little bit, because we're actually entering into Hanukkah tonight. When the sun went down tonight, that began Hanukkah. It's going to be going for 8 days. All right, so all of next week as well. First Maccabees chapter 1, and I'm going to see what I actually have time to get into. I want to set the scene with First Maccabees chapter 1, and if I have time, I'll get into these first 4 chapters, but I probably won't have time, but I guess we'll see. First Maccabees chapter 1, starting with verse 1, and it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Kittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead, the first over Greece. Right. So what what the world calls Alexander the Great. The Bible calls him the first over Greece, but he's Alexander the Macedonian. All right. That's only important if you really dive into who the Macedonians were in the biblical context. All right, Agagites. They were Edomites, specifically of Amalek and his seed, and made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth. Right, because Alexander, he was very mighty. All right, he was a very mighty man of war. All right, and went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations. Right, robbed the nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him; nobody could stand up against him. Whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. Right, he got very proud of himself and in conquering basically everything from Greece to India. Right, he took over all that with Egypt included. He destroyed Zidon. Right, he destroyed the Phoenician capital, forced all them to run to Carthage. All right, and he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. Right, everybody had to pay him taxes. All right, everything from I think as far north as like mainland Europe, so up north of Greece, as far south as like the Nile. I don't think he went all the way into Ethiopia, but damn near. And as far east as the Indus River in India. So he just took over like everything. I don't think he went very far west though, I will say that. I don't think he ever took over Rome. As I said, he came from Kittim. So he was there, I think he was captive there, if I'm not mistaken. But he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. Everybody had to pay him taxes. And after these things, he fell sick. Right. So some people say it was a fever. Some people say it was syphilis. It's kind of up in the air of what he actually died from. But we do know that he got diseased. He fell sick and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable, and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. Right. So there's 4 generals that he had that he split his kingdom among. It was Cassander, Lysimachus, Seleucus, and Ptolemy. 2 are fairly inconsequential. Cassander and Lysimachus were fairly inconsequential. I always forget which regions they ruled over. But it was one ruled over one ruled over Thrace, the other ruled over Macedonia. And I want to say Cassander ruled over Macedonia and Lysimachus over Thrace. I could be mistaken. But regardless, the ones who really matter in the historical side of things are Seleucus, who ruled over what was known as Syria, which was part of Turkey and Syria, which and everything east basically. Right, so that includes Babylon, Persia, all the way to India. Was ruled over by Seleucus, and you had Ptolemy, who was ruler over the African regions of like Egypt and about like Libya and whatnot, all the way down to Nile, including Sinai and Jerusalem, right, the Holy Land. Ptolemy ruled over all that initially. Seleucus and Ptolemy ended up fighting one another, and what's known as the Seleucid and Ptolemaic Wars, right? You read about that prophecy in Daniel 11. But anyway. Wherefore he called his servants such as were honorable, and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, right? Whatever it was, syphilis, fever, whatever it was that killed him, it ended up killing him, right? That disease killed him. And then died. And his servants bare rule everyone in his place, right? Those factions split up. And I do have a map here. Let me see if I can't find it real quick. I don't believe it tells what who ruled over each land. Maybe it does. The Greece divided map basically just shows what I just described. I don't think it. What was that? Lysimachus. Yeah. Okay. So you do have Lysimachus over Thrace, and it says Macedonia and Greece, but that was ruled by Cassander. As you see here. So it does say of who got what. So it says Empire of the Seleucidae. And this is, I guess it's how it was originally divided, but it was it's speaking of it like after the fact, obviously. But you have here Ptolemais, or the Ptolemies, all the way from basically from Hermon in the Holy Land, Mount Hermon, all the way down into different parts of Africa was ruled by Ptolemais, or ruled by Ptolemy. Then you had Seleucus ruling over all this, Syria and East Turkey, all the way into Babylon and Persia. So there's a map if you're unfamiliar with the territory. Let's see. The servants bear rule, everyone in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. So you see what happened with Alexander. He just conquered everything, right? He never really got a chance to rule, all right? But he just conquered everything. That was his thing. And he died in his early 30s. I believe he was like 32 or maybe even 30, 31. And he died a very young man after he did all this conquering. And he couldn't rule. So he split it among his servants. He didn't have any heir because the Greeks, they were super gay and only like banged out little boys and stuff. And I'm just being honest. That's what they did. So he didn't have an heir. And he just split it among his generals. All right. And evils were multiplied in the earth. That's the context of the Greeks. That's the context of the world at that time. It's just very evil, very wicked, all this pagan worship of the Greek gods and everything that they did, all right, all their lewdness, all their debauchery, all their hedonism, it was all perpetuated, all right? And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, right? So this is Antiochus the fourth. He is of the Seleucid dynasty, son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. Right, so this is obviously 137 years later. Antiochus comes into power. In those days, went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, "Let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow." Right, so the book of 2 Maccabees recounts the same history as the book of the First Maccabees. It's just in more detail, all right? Second Maccabees covers more detail, and it talks more about like the transition time as well from the destruction of Jerusalem to the reigning of the Greeks, right? To the reign of Antiochus, right? So it talks about, like, there's a story of Jeremiah, what happened when the Jerusalem was being destroyed. There's a story of Nehemiah and the restoration of Jerusalem. But also it goes into, it talks about one of the high priests, Onias, and his righteousness. And then it talks about Antiochus and some of these wicked men that it's talking about here, right? One named Menelaus, another named Jason, Simon, a Benjamite. So it talks about some of these wicked men who wanted to be like the Greeks and wanted to do evil in Israel, in Jerusalem. So check out 2 Maccabees, but I'm just going to be focused on 1 Maccabees tonight. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, "Let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow." So this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. Right, so the king gave them a government grant. Right, Antiochus gave them a government grant to do whatever they wanted to be like the Greeks. Right, to set up idols and whatnot. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the custom of the heathen. Right, they built a gymnasium at Jerusalem, which the word gymnasium literally means a place of naked exercise. Right. That's what it means in the ancient Greek, all right? And it's similar to like a gym today, right? It's just that everybody today, they still wear skimpy clothing, whereas back then they were wearing no clothing, all right? Working out with no clothes, all right? doing their different workout routines and their training for sports that they had back then. Discus is what specifically it says in 2nd Maccabees. All right. So as I said in verse 15 here, it says, and made themselves uncircumcised and forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to do mischief. Right. So when it said and made themselves uncircumcised, it's not saying they went and found the foreskin and put it back on. All right. It's talking about in customs. All right. They become uncircumcised in customs. All right. As Moses said, circumcise the foreskin of your heart. They forsook that. All right. They forsook the spiritual aspects to circumcision, right? They, as I said, they forsook the holy covenant. That's how they made themselves uncircumcised. By following the ways of the Greeks, by worshiping idols, all right? By joining themselves to the heathen, all right? Doing things that, as I said, were sold to do mischief. Doing things that God would not have them do, all right? Now, it goes on to say how Antiochus went to basically resparked the Seleucid Ptolemaic Wars. He went to go take Egypt from Ptolemais, from the Ptolemies. And as we saw in the map, Jerusalem used to be considered part of the Ptolemaic region, right? Considered part of the Egyptian region. So I guess I'll read into this. Now, when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt, that he might have the dominion of 2 realms. Wherefore he entered into Egypt with a great multitude, with chariots and elephants and horsemen and a great navy, and made war against Ptolemy, king of Egypt. But Ptolemy was afraid of him and fled, and many were wounded to death. Right. So Ptolemy, he was not as mighty as a warrior as Antiochus Epiphanes was. He fled. Right. Thus they got the strong cities in the land of Egypt, and he took the spoils thereof. And after that, Antiochus had spent in Egypt, he returned again in the 143rd year, right? So it's 6 years into his reign, and went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude, right? So he went against the Holy Land, and entered proudly into the sanctuary, and took away the golden altar and the candlestick of light and all the vessels thereof, right? So took away the menorah, took away the golden altar, as it said. Took away all the precious things that God had ordained for the temple, and the table of shewbread, and the pouring vessels, and the vials, and the censers of gold, and the veil, and the crown, and the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all which he pulled off. Right, so he took everything that was valuable, everything that was gold, everything that was of precious metals, and everything else he just pulled it down, defiled it. Trying to think of a good word for it here. Polluted it is another word that's going to be used. He took also the silver and the gold and the precious vessels. Also he took the hidden treasures which he found. And when he had taken all away, he went into his own land, having made a great massacre and spoken very proudly. Right. So it mentions how he stole everything out the temple, but it kind of glosses over because it mentions that he made a great massacre. But there were Levites and priests all throughout the temple who would have been like saying, no, don't stop, right? Stop, don't take that, that's holy. And he was just killing all them people, all right? As he went through the land, he was just killing all the people, all right? People trying to stop him from doing what he was doing, the wickedness that he was doing. And he's just killing all the people, all right? And spoken very proudly. Therefore, there was a great mourning in Israel, in every place where they were, so that the princes and elders mourned. The virgins and young men were made feeble, and the beauty of women was changed. Every bridegroom took up lamentation, and she that sat in the marriage chamber was in heaviness, right? And everybody that should be rejoicing was filled with sadness. The land also was moved for the inhabitants thereof, and all the house of Jacob was covered with confusion, right? People wondering why this is happening. And after 2 years fully expired, the king sent his chief collector of tribute unto the cities of Judah, who came unto Jerusalem with a great multitude, and spake peaceable words unto them, but all was deceit. But when they had given him credence, he fell suddenly upon the city, and smote it very sore, and destroyed much people of Israel. Right, so he came, his chief collector, right, his chief collector of tribute, his tax collector came to Jerusalem, and said, "Oh, it's all good. We just want you to pay us," and then boom, destroyed much people of Israel. And when he had taken the spoils of the city, he set it on fire, and pulled down the houses and walls thereof on every side, right? Just wrecking shop, right? Like a bull in a china shop. But the women and children took they captive. and possessed the cattle. Right, so they took slaves, took them into Europe. All right, and the cattle as well. Then builded they the city of David with a great and strong wall, and with mighty towers, and made it a stronghold for them. Right, so they had built, or they had set a garrison, as other scriptures say. They set a garrison in Jerusalem. Right, made it a Greek defense. Right, and set a stronghold for them. Made it a Greek outpost, and they put therein a sinful nation, wicked men, and fortified themselves therein. Right, so whether that be Greeks or others who kept Greek custom, regardless. They put them in Jerusalem. They stored it also with armor and victuals, and when they had gathered together the spoils of Jerusalem, they laid them up there. And so they became a sore snare. All right, so they once they had stole everything from the people, they had gathered it to the place, the garrison, the fortified place of the city that they had established. For it was a place to lie in wait against the sanctuary and an evil adversary to Israel. You see that right there. So they had turned the holy city that God had chose to place his name there, they had turned it into an evil adversary to Israel. Thus they shed innocent blood on every side of the sanctuary and defiled it. Right? Defiled the sanctuary, defiled the temple, defiled the altar. Insomuch that the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them. Whereupon the city was made an habitation of strangers and became strange to those that were born in her. And her own children left her. You see that right there? So the people that were born and raised in Jerusalem, the Israelites of Judah and Benjamin, and of every a remnant of every other tribe as well. Obviously, you had Levites therein as well. But it's specifically a border city. Jerusalem was always a border city to Judah and Benjamin. Right? Levites were there. They had to flee. If they wanted to be righteous, they had to flee because the Greeks were killing all the righteous. All right. Her sanctuary was laid waste like a wilderness. Her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into reproach, her honor into contempt. As had been her glory, so was her dishonor increased, and her excellency was turned into mourning. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people. All right, so he said, look, leave your laws, and it goes on to say here, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Why? Because the heathen don't have a God in heaven, right? So their gods aren't real. They don't mind leaving their gods to worship Greek gods. I mean, that's what the other nations did anyway. They picked up any god of their liking, any god of their choosing. However, the Israelites, it was different, right? The Israelites have a God in heaven, right? And so we were not ones to just do that. Not everyone, at least. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath, right? So there were certain Israelites, as we read at the beginning of the chapter, there were certain Israelites who chose to follow Antiochus. For the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah that they should follow the strange laws of the land, right? They specifically had to tell the inhabitants of Judah, like, hey, look, you got to do what we're doing, because I see that there's some of y'all that ain't doing it. Y'all got to start worshiping Zeus and Poseidon and whatnot. And forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days. They say, hey, look, all that stuff that you're doing to upkeep the temple, all that stuff you're doing to, worship your God, you got to stop doing that. And pollute the sanctuary and holy people. Set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts. They say, hey, look, all that stuff, all that distinction, all that difference that y'all make between the clean and the unclean, y'all got to stop doing that. Because the Greeks don't do that, so y'all should stop doing it. That they should also leave their children uncircumcised. He said, hey, look, stop circumcising your kids and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation. Like, look, feed them this pork chop over here we got for them. Feed them this ham sandwich, all right? Tell them to worship Zeus. To the end they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. That was the goal, that the Israelites should change all the laws and the ordinances that God had commanded us to do, all right? And whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said he should die. Right? So that's what the king said. Whoever don't do what I command them to do, put them to death. In the selfsame manner wrote he to his whole kingdom, and appointed overseers over all the people, commanding the cities of Judah to sacrifice city by city. All right, so hey, everywhere and everybody got to worship Zeus and Hermes and all them. Then many of the people were gathered unto them, to wit, everyone that forsook the law, and so they committed evils in the land. Right? So, as I said, many of the people, right, many of the Israelites, they said, okay, we're going to do that. And they set up temples and chapels and sacrificed swine's flesh, did all sorts of evil against the laws of God, worshiping other gods. They did that. All right? Israelites did that. And committed evils in the land with the Greeks. And drove the Israelites into secret places, even wheresoever they could flee for succor. Right? So the righteous people, the righteous Israelites, they had to run. They had to get up out of there. All right? Now the 15th day of the month Caslu, in the 145th year, so this is 2 years after he took over Egypt, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar, right, as was prophesied by Daniel, and built an idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side, and burnt incense at the doors of their houses and in the streets. And when they had rent in pieces the books of the law which they found, they burnt them with fire, right? So destroying the Bible, all right? They're making the people do wickedly, making the people serve other gods, and burning Bibles, all right? And whosoever was found with any book of the testament, or if any committed to the law, the king's commandment was that they should put him to death. So if anybody was found reading the Bible, anybody found doing what it says, they got put to death by Antiochus Epiphanes. Thus did they, by their authority unto the Israelites every month, to as many as were found in the cities, right? So they would go on these patrols every month, trying to find new people that's still out here keeping the commandments, that's still out here doing what the Bible says, so that they could kill them. This is what the Greeks did. This is what Antiochus IV did, all right? Now the 25th day of the month, they did sacrifice upon the idol altar, which was upon the altar of God, right? So upon the holy altar, right, in the temple, they had set up a different altar that was to Zeus, right? Or as it says in 2 Maccabees 6, Jupiter Olympus, right? Which, if you know anything about those pagan gods, you know that Jupiter and Zeus is the same entity, or is the same idol. One is Romanized, one's Greek. One's Greek. Now the 25th day of the month, they did sacrifice upon the idol altar, which was upon the altar of God, right? So this is the 25th day of the 9th month that they did this, right, in the 145th year of the Greeks. At which time, according to the commandment, they put to death certain women that had caused their children to be circumcised, right? So they killed the women who were trying to keep the covenant with their children. And they hanged the infants about their necks and rifled their houses and slew them that had circumcised them, right? So in those days, I'm sure it was probably the priest circumcising the children, right? So they killed the woman, they killed the mother, they killed the babies, and they killed the priest who did it, all right? So they killed everybody that they found trying to keep the commandments. It didn't matter if they were babies or not. All right. Howbeit, many in Israel were fully resolved and confirmed in themselves not to eat any unclean thing. Right, and you read stories about this in 2 Maccabees, right? In 2 Maccabees 6 and 2 Maccabees 7 specifically. You read about stories of people who refused to eat any unclean thing. Wherefore, the rather to die, that they might not be defiled with meats, and that they might not profane the holy covenant, so then they died. And there was very great wrath upon Israel, right? So a lot of people chose rather to die than to forsake the holy covenant. Other people were not so. Whether they were weak or whether they were willingly becoming like the Gentiles, they chose to do that. Others chose death. Others fled. All right? So I'm going to try to be quicker. I just wanted to set the scene because that first chapter really sets the scene of how it was in those days. All right? I'm going to be a little quicker with the next chapter and get to the point in chapter 4. So 1 Maccabees chapter 2, it says, in those days arose Mattathias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Joram, from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin. All right? So you have Mattathias and his family, and he had 5 sons. Johanan, called Caddis, Simon, called Thassi, Judas, who was called Maccabeus, Eleazar, called Alvaron, and Jonathan, whose surname was Aphus. Right? So he had 5 sons. John Caddis, Simon Thassi, Judas Maccabeus, Eleazar, Avaran, and Jonathan Apphus. Mainly for the book of First Maccabees, mainly who you read about obviously is Judas Maccabeus. That's who the book is named after. But also Jonathan Apphus and Simon Thassi. Those are the main characters of the book of the Maccabees. All right. And when he saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he said, so this is Mattathias, he said, "Woe is me! Wherefore was I born to see this misery of my people and of the holy city, and to dwell there when it was delivered into the hand of the enemy, and the sanctuary into the hand of strangers?" Right? So he said, why do I have to see this? Why do I have to live in a time that is as bad as this time? Her temple has become as a man without glory. Her glorious vessels are carried away into captivity. Her infants are slain in the streets. Her young men with the sword of the enemy. What nation hath not had a part in her kingdom and gotten of her spoils? He said, look, everybody has come against Jerusalem at that time. All right. All her ornaments are taken away. Of a free woman, she has become a bondslave. Right. He said, we're in captivity to these Greeks. And behold, our sanctuary, even our beauty and our glory, is laid waste, and the Gentiles have profaned it. To what end, therefore, shall we live any longer? He said, why are we still living? Why are we still alive? Then Mattathias and his sons rent their clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn very sore. In the meanwhile, the king's officers, such as compelled the people to revolt, came into the city of Modin, to make them sacrifice. And when many of Israel came unto them, Mattathias also and his sons came together. Right, so these Greek officers called the people to the town square, so to speak, and Mattathias and his sons were there as well. Then answered the king's officers, and said to Mattathias on this wise, Thou art a ruler and an honorable and a great man in this city, and strengthened with sons and brethren. Now therefore come thou first, and fulfill the king's commandment, like as all the heathen have done, yea, and the men of Judah also, and such as remain at Jerusalem. So shalt thou and thy house be in the number of the king's friends, and thou and thy children shall be honored with silver and gold and many rewards. Right? So Mattathias, he's probably at this time, 50s, 60s. Obviously his sons are grown. And so they show up to the town square, and somebody approaches him. Hey, you're a well-renowned man in the area. Hey, come show the people how to serve the Greeks, and you'll be honored. You and your family will be honored. All you have to do is eat this ham sandwich and show the people it's okay to eat this ham sandwich, and just bow down to Zeus real quick. Just show the people it's okay to worship Zeus. Then Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice, Though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him and fall away every one from the religion of their fathers and give consent to his commandments, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers. God forbid that we should forsake the law and the ordinances. We will not hearken to the king's words to go from our religion, either on the right hand or the left. Right? So he's standing boldly. He says, I don't care if you kill me. All right? We will keep the covenant that God gave to us. Now when he had left speaking these words, there came one of the Jews in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar which was at Modin, according to the king's commandment. You had somebody else step out and say, I'll do it. You still offering that reward to anybody? You offering that offer to anybody? I'll worship Zeus. It just completely undermining what Mattathias just said. Doesn't care about standing boldly for the Lord. Which thing when Mattathias saw, he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled. Neither could he forbear to show his anger according to judgment, wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar. So just like, and it goes on to say, just like Phineas, all right, in the days, or I should say in Numbers 25, had great zeal for the Lord in that moment, slew the idolater. Same way that Mattathias was in this moment, slew the idolater. As God said to do in his judgment, by the way. Also the king's commissioner who compelled men to sacrifice, he killed at that time, and the altar he pulled down. Right? So he killed that first guy. He said, look, I ain't going to get out of this without killing this Greek as well. He killed that Greek man, and he pulled down that altar to Zeus or to whoever it was. Maybe it was to Hermes or Artemis or one of these other, Greek idols. Regardless. Thus he dealt zealously for the law of God, like as Phineas did unto Zambri, the son of Salom. And Mattathias cried throughout the city with a loud voice, saying, Whosoever is zealous of the law and maintain the covenant, let him follow me. So he and his sons fled into the mountains and left all that ever they had in the city. Then many that sought after justice and judgment went down into the wilderness to dwell there. Right? So there was many who followed because they were waiting on a righteous example like Mattathias set. and they were waiting. That happened with Mattathias. Mattathias did that thing, showing his zeal for the Lord, and then they fled into the mountains to flee from the Greeks. All right. So I'm gonna jump down later to Mattathias' death. All right. So actually, it says then Mattathias and his friends went round about and pulled down the altars. Right. So they were trying to cleanse the land little by little, as it says in 2 Maccabees, little by little. And what children soever they found within the coast of Israel, uncircumcised, those they circumcised valiantly, right? So the priests, they went through and circumcised, they themselves being priests, Mattathias and his 5 sons. So they went through circumcising children. They pursued also after the proud men, and the work prospered in their hand. So they recovered the law out of the hand of the Gentiles, and out of the hand of kings, neither suffered they the sin of triumph, right? So they were taking the land back little by little in righteousness. Now, when the time drew near that Mattathias should die, he said unto his sons, now hath pride and rebuke gotten strength, and the time of destruction and the wrath of indignation. Now, therefore, my sons, be zealous for the law, and give your lives for the covenant of your fathers. Right, so he's given his sons a speech right before he dies. It doesn't say whether he died of old age or died in battle, but he just knew he was about to die. Excuse me. Call to remembrance what acts our fathers did in their time, so shall you receive great honor and an everlasting name. Was not Abraham found faithful in temptation, and it was imputed unto him for righteousness? Joseph, in the time of his distress, kept the commandment and was made Lord of Egypt. Phinehas, our father, in being zealous and fervent, obtained the covenant of an everlasting priesthood. Jesus, for fulfilling the word, was made a judge in Israel. He's talking about Joshua there. Caleb, for bearing witness before the congregation, received the heritage of the land. David, for being merciful, possessed the throne of an everlasting kingdom. Elias, for being zealous and fervent for the law, was taken up into heaven, that being Elijah. Ananias, Azarias, and Mishael, by believing, were saved out of the flame. That would be Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're Babylonian names, but Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael are their Hebrew names. Daniel, for his innocency, was delivered from the mouth of lions. And thus consider ye throughout all ages that none that put their trust in him shall be overcome. Fear not then the words of a sinful man, for his glory shall be dung and worms. Today he shall be lifted up, and tomorrow he shall not be found, because he has returned into his dust, and his thought is come to nothing. And that does end up happening with Antiochus. All right, he does that his glory shall be dung and worms. He was eaten by a disease, like his flesh was eaten by what initially started as like an internal thing, but it turned into like a flesh-eating virus. Or, I don't know if it was virus, bacteria, but it was a disease. Wherefore ye, my sons, be valiant and show yourselves men in the behalf of the law, for by it shall ye obtain glory. And behold, I know that your brother Simon is a man of counsel. Give ear unto him always. He shall be a father unto you. And, as for Judas Maccabeus, he hath been mighty and strong, even from his youth up. Let him be your captain and fight the battle of the people. Right, so keep that in mind. Judas Maccabeus was the most mighty of the 5 brethren. He led the people in battle. Simon was a counselor who he lived the longest of the brothers, but he fought valiantly. He just wasn't as mighty as Judas Maccabeus. None of the 5 brethren were. Take also unto you all those that observe the law and avenge ye the wrong of your people. Recompense fully the heathen, and take heed to the commandments of the law. So he blessed them and was gathered to his fathers. Right? He died in the 146th year, and his sons buried him in the sepulchres of his fathers at Modin. And all Israel made great lamentation for him. Right? Mattathias was a righteous man and dealt zealously for the law. I'm going to get to the point down here in 1 Maccabees 4 concerning Hanukkah. All right. So Judas Maccabeus is fighting and gaining more territory for each battle. They made it all the way to Jerusalem. And as it says here, so they joined battle, and there were slain of the host of Lysias, about 5,000 men. Lysias is one of the officers or generals, you may even say, of Antiochus. And there were slain of the host of Lysias about 5,000 men. Even before them were they slain. Now when Lysias saw his army put to flight, and the manliness of Judas' soldiers, and how they were ready either to live or die valiantly, he went into Antiochia, and gathered together a company of strangers, and having made his army greater than it was, he proposed to come again into Judea. Then said Judas and his brethren, behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. Right. So they took that opportunity that Lysias was taken to like regroup in Antiochia and gather more men, more soldiers. Judas and his brethren, as it said there, took that time to cleanse the temple and the sanctuary. Upon this, all the host assembled themselves together and went up into Mount Zion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate and the altar profaned and the gates burned up and the shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest or in one of the mountains, yea, and the priest chambers pulled down, right, they saw it desecrated. They rent their clothes and made great lamentation and cast ashes upon their head, right, they made great mourning. And fell down flat to the ground upon their faces and blew an alarm with the trumpets and cried toward heaven. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he had cleansed the sanctuary. Right, so they're still having to fight off the enemies while they're cleansing the sanctuary. But it's important and necessary for them to rededicate the temple here. All right, so he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, who cleansed the sanctuary and bare out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when, as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profaned, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach to them because the heathen had defiled it, wherefore they pulled it down. Right? So they said, we don't want to sacrifice on the same altar that the heathen had been sacrificing to, like Zeus and whatnot. All right, so we're gonna get a different altar. All right, and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. Then they took whole stones according to the law and built a new altar according to the former, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple and out of the courts. They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar of burnt offerings and of incense and the table. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple. All right, so they got all the things back. Right, they got things back and made new holy vessels. All right, they lit the menorah. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out the veils and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals. Right? So the same day, 3 years later, all right, that it was profaned, 3 years after that, it was rededicated again. All right? It was cleansed again by Judas and his brothers. Right? The sons of Mattathias. All right? Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the God of heaven who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days and offered burnt offerings with gladness and sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed and hanged doors upon them. Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. All right, so there's great rejoicing, great gladness among the people. All right. Moreover, Judas and his brethren, with the whole congregation of Israel, ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month Caslu, with mirth and gladness. All right. So there we have it. There we have the Feast of Dedication established. It was established that we should keep that from year to year. 8 days, starting from the 25th day of the month Caslu, which is the 9th month. All right. The 9th moon, 25 days after the 9th moon, and then we go for 8 days, right? So it always goes into the 10th month. There's always a new moon in the middle of it, all right? So I do just want to point out this, specifically talking about Hanukkah, is a day that Christ celebrated, all right? So we should do if we claim to be Christians, right? If we claim to be followers of Christ, we should be keeping this day as well. All right. In John 10 and 22, it says, "And it was at Jerusalem the feast of the dedication, and it was winter." Right? It's in the winter. And Jesus walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. Right? So he was there to celebrate it as well. All right? So it's a day that Christ celebrated. It's a day that we should celebrate and remember the history, all right, about how God fights for us against the wicked, all right, against all evil that's going on, all right. So with that, hope y'all learned something. I'm closing out with Matthew 26. Oh, excuse me, that's Malachi. That's not Matthew. But yeah, every year we get an opportunity. Every year we get the opportunity to read about this history, to learn about this history. All right, there's a few different days that were ordained during the time of the Maccabean family. It was an important time. It was an important time in the history of the Israelites, and it's a time that people don't speak of because they took the books of the Maccabees out the Bible. All right. Because they don't want you to learn this history. America loves the Greeks. They don't want you to talk about how wicked they were and all the evil that they did. All right. In Matthew 26, starting in verse 6. "Now when Jesus was in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, there came unto him a woman having an alabaster box of very precious ointment, and poured it on his head as he sat at meat. But when his disciples saw it, they had indignation, saying, To what purpose is this waste? For this ointment might have been sold for much and given to the poor. When Jesus understood it, he said unto them, Why trouble ye the woman? For she hath wrought a good work upon me. For ye have the poor always with you, but me ye have not always. For in that she hath poured this ointment on my body, she did it for my burial. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also this that this woman have done be told for a memorial of her." So Christ commanded us to keep the memorial of that sister. So that's what we do. All right. We keep that sister in our memory. We keep that sister in our remembrance for the wonderful thing that she did for our Lord. So with that, hope y'all learned something. I'm going to say shalom, happy Sabbath, happy Hanukkah, and let God be magnified.